Takulandirani ku AMTV Malawi kuchimake kwa nkhani zenizeni. Ngati nkhani imeneyo kuno kulibe, dziwani kuti nkhani imeneyo ndi yabodza.
Let's pray. Almighty God, who in wisdom and goodness has appointed office of the rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we ask you to behold with abundant favor as your servants, whom you've been pleased to call to the performance of important trust in this land. Let your blessings descend upon us and grant that we may turn and consider all matters that shall come under tribulation in so just and faithful manner as to promote your honor and glory and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of this country and of those whose interests are committed to our charge. Amen.
General business, communication from the chair.
A very good afternoon, members. From the Speaker's office, I have this announcement. Honourable members, you recall that yesterday, the chair reserved a ruling on a matter the Honourable Government Chief Whip raised regarding statements made by the member of Mzimba North. In his submission, the Chief Whip stated that he had received information from Mbera District Council, which he requested to be secreted in the House. I have requested the Secretariat to secrete the information as requested by the Honourable Chief Whip. Honour members, you also recall that the member from Mzimba North attempted to ask a supplementary question on the status of CDF for his constituency for a particular year. The chair then advised the member from Mzimba North to raise the matter appropriately in accordance with standing orders. The member proceeded to submit a notice of question by private notice under Standing Order 769 on the issue, and the notice of the question has been sent to the Minister of Local Government and National Unity. Now, there is a question on the same matter. I rule that the Minister of Local Government, Unity and Culture should address the matter through his response to the question as asked by the member of Mzimba North. A further ruling, if necessary, may be made after the Honourable Minister responds to the question. I so rule on behalf of the Speaker, the Honourable Catherine Godanhara. That ends the announcement. Thank you.
General business, item 2B, presentation of delegation reports. The Honourable Member from Sanje Central to present a delegation report on the issues of migration, management, training of selected members of the Committee on Defence and Security held in South Africa from 30th May to 1st June 2023.
I see Minister of Lands. Minister of Lands.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable First Deputy Speaker. First Deputy Speaker, in the August House, I wish to bring to your attention that as guided by the House yesterday, we are going to start with presentation of response towards the budget. And this is a report from the Agriculture and Natural Resources. I submit First Deputy Speaker, sir.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister of Lands. May you move a motion in that regard. Move a motion in that regard. Thank you.
First Deputy Speaker, I wish to move that we start with, I wish to move that we vary the order paper and that we start with business carried over from yesterday, presentation of response towards the budget from the Agriculture and the Natural Resources Committee. I beg to move.
Honorable, dear brother, Honorable Minister, next time say we will starting orders instead of government business, and then you mentioned item. You missed the government business, but because you're a senior man, chair of chairs before, we can't trouble you so much. You're a nice person. Honorable members, there's a motion as put by the Minister of Lands standing for the leader of the House. Those other people say aye. No, it's too early to produce a low sound. Those other people say aye. Better. And those of the economy say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried.
Government business, budget motion, chairpersons of cluster committees.
I see our very own, the people of Nshisi South, Kwakui, Kamtsonga, Mbuyedziko, Ndesa, Anage Gula Mkuru. Welcome. The chairperson, deputy chairperson for Agriculture Committee. Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. First Deputy Speaker. First Deputy Speaker, this is a report from cluster number 1, cluster which comprises of 2 committees, Agriculture and Irrigation and Natural Resources and Climate Change. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, my fellow parliamentarians, I stand before you today to present a comprehensive analysis grounded in the meticulous findings of the cluster number 1, a document that provides invaluable insights. I, on behalf of the cluster, aim to provide compelling evidence for strategic budgetary adjustments that will maximize impact, ensure sustainable development, and timely contribute to the effective implementation of the budget. First Deputy Speaker, your cluster believes that it is our collective responsibility to scrutinize the budget thoroughly, identify its strengths and weaknesses, and make informed decisions that will lead to tangible and positive outcomes for the people we serve. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, I will focus on votes from the Ministry of Agriculture, which is vote 190. This is on ADMA, Pesticide Control Board, Cotton Council of Malawi, Cannabis Regulatory Authority, Shire Valley Transformation Program, National Water Resources Authority, Ministry of Natural Resources and Climate Change, vote 470 on MEPA, Atomic Energy Regulatory Authority, National Herbarium and Botanical Gardens, Ministry of Energy, vote 490, which will focus on ESCOM, Ejenko, NOCMA, MERA, and Ministry of Water and Sanitation, 210. Under it, the Salima Lilongwe Water Supply Company, Northern Region Water Board, Southern Region Water Board, Central Region Water Board, Lilongwe Water Board, and under Ministry of Mining, vote 480, we have the Malawi Investment Mining Company, MAMICO, and Malawi Mining Regulatory Authority, MMRA. I will also highlight the challenges that these sectors face, present actionable recommendations with supporting budget figures from the Cluster 1 report, and demonstrate why these adjustments are essential for Malawi's long-term prosperity and stability. Agriculture and food security. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, allow me to begin with agriculture, the lifeblood of our nation, the engine of our rural economy, and the cornerstone of food security for every Malawi household. Let me start with the Agriculture Development and Marketing Corporation, ADMAC, which stands as a vital institution in this agriculture sector, entrusted with the critical responsibility of ensuring food availability and price stability. While it's encouraging to see an overall budget increase for ADMAC from 18.2 billion to 53 billion, we must not be appeased by this headline figure. Among granular look at the allocations reveals a deep disparity that demands our immediate attention, Mr. First Deputy Speaker. In 2024-2025, ADMAC received 26.3 billion for the strategic grain reserves, and in 2025-2026, 20 billion for strategic grain reserve. ADMAC has 28.4 billion loan from commercial banks, which government will take over repayment since ADMAC has no support stock. All major activities for ADMAC in the 2025-2026 budget allocation need to be increased. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the cluster also noted that ADMAC receives funding late, which forces it to go on the market late, hence does not complete the purchasing process. To rectify this precarious situation, the cluster proposes a comprehensive and urgent review of resource allocation within the Ministry of Agriculture, with a clear mandate to ensure that ADMAC receives the necessary and timely funding required to effectively fulfill its critical mandate. Specifically, based on the cluster's findings, an allocation of 300 billion is needed. 300 billion, and I underline that. This funding level will empower ADMAC to procure the necessary 250,000 metric tons of maize, effectively flooding the 359 markets across the nation and stabilizing maize prices during the crucial period from October to April. This strategic investment while significant, is an essential safeguard that will pay dividends in terms of social stability and economic well-being. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, allow me to talk now about the National Food Reserve Agency, which plays an absolutely indispensable role in maintaining our strategic grain reserves, which serve as a crucial buffer against food shortages and price spikes in the country. The current state of NFRI's reserves is deeply concerning and requires immediate and decisive action. In the 2024-2025 financial year, NFRI's strategic grain reserves were expected to receive 104 billion, while it was learned that by the end of March, when the Committee on Strategic Reserve would meet, NFRA will use its uncommitted SGR balance of 10.8 billion metric tons. Your cluster further learned that unlike 2024-2025 financial year, where NFRA had a stock of 60,000 metric tons in its reserves, the upcoming 2025-2026 financial year, NFRA has only the uncommitted 10,000 metric tons, which is yet to be utilized. Your cluster, therefore, observed that the 60 billion that was allocated for the purchase of maize in the 2025-2026 financial year will not be enough, as there is almost zero reserves since NFRA had committed maize to its two clients, ADMAC and DODMA. Your cluster therefore strongly recommends that NFRA should be allocated 150 billion to procure enough maize from mega farmers and in localities on time. The allocation of the funds will have NFRA procure 105,000 metric tons, which would ensure that the country has some base reserves. This cluster further recommends that Treasury should consider approving the projected funding for the personnel expenditure amounting to 1.7 billion to ensure competitive remunerations, as NFRA is struggling to attract key officers because of low salaries. Now, moving to the Cotton Council of Malawi, CCM. Your cluster observed that the council spent more resources on financial management and audit services amounting to 96 million kwacha as at mid-year out of the 188 million allocated. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the Cotton Council's performance has been underwhelming, with cotton production declining. Therefore, your cluster strongly recommended dissolving the Cotton Council and integrating its functions into the Ministry of Agriculture, streamlining operations to improve its efficiency. On a brighter note, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the Greenbelt Authority, GBA, has seen a substantial budget increase from 6.9 billion in the 2024-25 national budget and has also been allocated 41.4 billion in the 2024-25 national budget, which represents a 500% increase. The cluster also observed that Greenbelt Authority has made good progress in a number of projects, namely Tola Irora in Karonga, that's a scheme, Mega Farms Program Rehabilitation, which includes Nkopola, Ruea, and the Chikwa Mega Farm in Salima, and in Chalo, project rehabilitation for irrigation of various value chains such as cotton, sesame, and maize. However, Greenbelt has a shortfall of about 11.8 billion, which will mean a reduced hectareage for rehabilitation and developing infrastructure for irrigation. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, your cluster also noted that the 2,000 hectares of maize field in Salima is projected to produce a minimum of 800 metric tons. To maximize the impact of this investment, your cluster advised Greenbelt Authority to fast-track the development of the project since the budget has been increased by 500%. Your cluster also observed and recommended that Greenbelt Authority should focus on one project at a go to create a greater impact. The cluster further proposes that Greenbelt Authority should consider supplying grain to ADMAG and NFRA altogether, because ADMAG has ready markets across the country. To Treasury, the cluster, number one, recommends that you should consider allocating 400 million kwacha for compensation of land resettlement in areas where Greenbelt Authority is currently working, especially in Chikwawa Farm in Salima, and other areas like in Chalo, where land acquisition has been affected due to unpaid compensation. This is a must for Treasury. The final recommendation under Greenbelt Authority is that Treasury should prioritize Greenbelt Authority and allocate its funding on time to match operations of the authority, where irrigation can be done throughout the year, and therefore contributing to having adequate SGR, that is at both NFRA and ADMA. Greenbelt Authority is very key. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, your cluster also invited the Smallholder Fertilizer Revolving Fund, which plays a vital role in ensuring that our farmers have access to the essential inputs they need to enhance agricultural productivity. The cluster noted that SFF-RFM was allocated 102 billion in the 2023-2024 national budget, and that in the 2024-2025 national budget it has been allocated 150.7 billion for fertilizer payments. The cluster also observed that in the 2024-2025 financial year, SFF-RFM had planned to produce 67,000 tons, but scaled down to 36,000 tons during the mid-term budget review due to limited working capital and lack of forex. However, the cluster, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, is pleased to report to the House that in 2025-2026 financial year, one of the major projects for SFF-RFM is a collaboration to facilitate the feasibility study for the establishment of a fertilizer plant. However, the cluster observed that SFFRFM continues to face forex challenges, which affect the fulfillment of its mandate. Additionally, SFFRFM requires the recapitalization and replenishment of 89,000 metric tons, equivalent to 135 billion, which was used by government between 1995 and 2004. We need to, as government, they need to pay back to revolving so that it actually recapitalizes it. The cluster, therefore, proposes that to ensure the fund's continued effectiveness and its ability to support our farmers, it requires adequate resources for the recapitalization process. In this regard, the cluster strongly recommends that the 135 billion which government actually used between the years said above should be given back to SFFRFM, which could be used as the working capital. The cluster also recommends that since SFFRFM has been the provider for the AIP fertilizer, the AIP function should move from the Ministry of Agriculture to SFFRFM. And lastly, SFFRM should be assisted with forex and be allocated funds on time to ensure timely procurement and distribution of fertilizers across the country. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, I would also like to bring to your attention the matter of the Pesticides Control Board, a subvented vote. Despite the board presenting challenges affecting the operations like the lack of accredited laboratory, which forces the board to send pesticide samples outside the country, the cluster's strong recommendation is that the Pesticides Control Board should be dissolved, like the Cotton Council, and its functions returned to the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, I will now provide a brief update from the Cannabis Regulatory Authority and the Shire Valley Transformation Program. Cannabis Regulatory Authority, the total budget allocation to the CRA has been a marginal increase from 1.1 billion in the 2024-25 financial year to 1.1 billion in the 2025-26 financial year, representing a 10% increase. The cluster has concerns about coordination costs within the authority, noting that 187 million kwacha was spent on board meetings annually. To improve the authority's financial standing and effectiveness, the cluster recommends that the authority should utilize its own generated revenue, reduce cannabis fees to encourage industry participation, explore more off-taker engagements, and reconcile subvented funds. Shire Valley Transformation Program. Turning to Shire Valley Transformation Program, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the 2025-2026 financial year has a substantial budget of 172.1 billion. This funding is provided by IDA, FDB, and 5 billion from the Malawi government. This allocation is for phase 2 of the project, which will also support the construction of a temporary intake and a 6-kilometer canal to irrigate the Kambadwe cooperative, set to begin its operations in June 2026. The House may be pleased to note that the main intake, which was damaged by Cyclone Anna, is now under reconstruction by Ejenco, and it is at 60% completion. The cluster, therefore, recommends that the Shire Valley Transformation Project be expanded into a national program to allow broader investment and participation. Let me now turn to Ministry of Water and Sanitation, Vote 210. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, let us now turn our attention to the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, a sector of paramount importance for the healthy and well-being of our citizens. The total budget allocation to the Ministry of Water and Sanitation has increased from 202 billion in 2024-25 financial year to 281.7 billion in 2025-26 financial year. This allocation supports 4 major projects, namely Malawi water sanitation, groundwater extraction, solar-powered groundwater and Development and the Malawi Watershed Services Improvement Project. However, despite the overall increase, challenges remain. The cluster noted that for the groundwater extraction project, the 2024-2025 approved budget was 5.5 billion, but only 4 billion has been disbursed in the current 2025-2026 budget. Similarly, for the solar-powered project, the 2024-2025 approved budget was 884 million, but only 385 million has been disbursed so far. Further, several institutions under the Ministry of Water are facing specific funding shortfalls. For instance, the Salima Lilongwe Water Supply Company, which is a special vehicle for this project. In the 2024-25 financial year, the company raised 105 billion for project implementation, the resettlement action plan, and project management. In the 2025-26 financial year, the company plans to raise 264.4 billion, with 14 billion expected to come from the government. However, the cluster noted that in the 2024-2025 financial year, the company has been allocated only 200 million kwacha against a need of 2.4 billion, affecting its activities, including staff recruitment. In the 2025-26 financial year, the project was allocated 1 billion against a 4.4 billion budget, further affecting operations. The cluster further noted that the project requires an urgent 10 billion for the implementation of phase 2 of the resettlement action, as land acquisition for the pipeline along Salima Chezi is pending. So we need urgently 10 billion for land acquisition so that the project should fully roll out. Central Region Water Board. The cluster noted that the Central Region Water Board has 4 main projects in Doha: Salima, Chisi, and Kolongo, which in the 2025-26 financial year have been allocated a total of 7.5 billion against the requirement of 63.7 billion. The Central Region Water Board also reported losses due to non-cost reflective tariffs affecting its operations and free water connections initiatives. The cluster recommends that Central Region Water Board should be allocated the required 56.2 billion for main projects. Northern Region Water Board. The Northern Region Water Board reported significant progress in the Karonga and Kadabe project, but free water connections have affected on losses due to non-cost reflective tariffs. The cluster noted that the Northern Region Water Board was allocated 5.5 billion, but only 1 billion short of finalizing the Karonga project. Additionally, the Northern Region Water Board received no allocation for the Rumpi project, Lambilani Dam design, water service improvement, and rehabilitation of Likoma and Kisumu Islands. The cluster therefore strongly recommends allocation of 6.9 billion for the Rumpi project, 3.2 billion for Lambi Dam design, and at least 2 billion for the Northern Region Water Services improvement, and at least 1.5 billion for the rehabilitation of the Likoma and Kisumu Islands. Lilongwe Water Board. The cluster noted that, like other water boards, Lilongwe Water Board has 8 main projects planned for 2025-26 financial year, but these have been affected by high levels of non-revenue water supply chain disruptions and low revenue collections efficiency from MTAs. The cluster strongly recommends that Treasury should consider the Lilongwe Water Board by allocating 17 billion for the Nsundwe water supply project and network disinfection and expansion in Lilongwe. Consider the adjustment of the tariff from the minimum of 10% to the optimal being of 25% support for loan financing submission to Badea of actually $20 million, and settlement of accrued government water bills amounting to 10 billion, which has crippled the efficient operations of the board. The Blantyre Water Board. The Blantyre Water Board projected 53.1 billion in an annual revenue for 2024-25 financial year and 64.9 billion for 2025-26 financial year. The cluster noted challenges in obtaining counterpart funding for projects like Massive One from the government, which could affect donor funding and project implementation. The Blantyre Water Board requires 3.3 billion for its two major projects, the World Bank Massive One project and Phase 2 rehabilitation of Sanjika Palace. The Southern Region Water Board reported having 5 main projects for the 2025-26 financial year, with a total allocation of 10.2 billion against a budget of a request of 26.9 billion, leaving a budgetary gap of 17.4 billion. The Southern Region Water Board requests prioritization of the Mangochi, Lakeshore, and Makanjira and Zarewa water supply projects, requiring an additional funding of 12.3 billion. Malawi Kwacha. This is a must again to the Treasury. The cluster noted that the board is struggling with the situation at the Mlunguzi Dam due to deforestation and tree harvesting. The board noted that water levels may continue to lower, affecting water distribution in Zomba. Specific underfunding concerns in the eastern region include Makanjira, Zarewa, Mangochi, Lakeshore sources. The cluster noted that a mineral water plant established by Southern Region Water Board has the potential to increase revenue, but requires a quick electricity connection. The cluster further recommends that the Southern Region Water Board should be allocated an additional 2.1 billion for the Mangochi Lakeshore project, an additional 10.2 billion for Makanjira and Zarewa water supply project, which would stop if the additional funds are not allocated. Additionally, the cluster recommends that there is need for government to consider declaring the Mulunguzi forest plantation to Malawi Defense Force to ensure its security of the forest and water conservation around the clock. My Minister of Mining, vote 480. Turning our attention to the Minister of Mining, a sector with immense potential to contribute to our national wealth and economic diversification, we observe a complex budgetary situation that requires careful and quick consideration, honorable members. And this is direct to the Minister of Finance. The ministry has been allocated a total of 10.66 billion in the 2025-26 financial year. This figure includes 4 billion specifically for the mining investment company. This allocation represents a 22% budget increase compared to the 8.75 billion allocated in the 2024-2025 financial year. It's worth noting that the mining budget has seen substantial growth in recent years. The 2024-25 financial year budget more than doubled in 2023-24 financial year budget of 3.63 billion. In fact, the budget has grown 5.5 times in just 5 years, from 1.9 billion in 2021-22 to 10.6 billion in 2025-26. However, a closer examination of the allocations reveals a significant imbalance. The cluster observed that out of the 10.66 billion budget, a disproportionate 76% or 8.08 billion has been allocated to the management and supporting service programs. In contrast, only 24% has been allocated to the core programs of mining and geological services. The cluster noted that this allocation was an unproductive and imprudent way of utilizing limited resources. Furthermore, the cluster observed that the vote had budgets for the Mining and Minerals Regulatory Authority, where in 2024-25, the authority was allocated 805.5 million kwacha. Additionally, the cluster noted that the vote had a budget for the Malawi Mining Investment Company, Mamigo, which during the budget preparation stage, it was a project under the Public Sector Investment Program. where it was allocated 4.1 billion meant for mineral exploration equipment. Now, a fully-fledged company, Mamico, requires a provision for personal emoluments, investment capital for proposed business ventures, administration, and other recurrent transactions and other activities totaling to 29.5 billion in the 25-26 financial year. Funding. The cluster further noted that the ministry, together with the MMRA and Mamico, has potential to bring in more revenue to the government purse. The cluster observed that despite the country adopting the ATM policy, the mining sector has not been fully prioritized due to the inadequate funding. Therefore, to unlock the revenue generation potential of the mining sector and address the funding inadequacies, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the cluster recommends that the ministry should be considered additional funding of 17.7 billion, particularly 5 billion for the construction of the mining and geological laboratory complex in Mzuzu, and 7 billion for the procurement of mining, geological, and laboratory equipment. The cluster believes that the additional funds will assist the institutions with their efficiency operations, thereby ability to realize revenue projected at 3 billion in the 2025-26 financial year, 3.3 billion in the 26-27 financial year, and 3.6 billion again in the 2027-28 financial year, as indicated by MMRA, should be actually gotten. The cluster further recommends that Mamico should be allocated 29.5 billion to assist in the operation of its newly established company. Now I turn to Minister of Energy. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, moving on to the critical sector of energy, a sector that serves as the bedrock for our economy, for economic growth, industrial development, and overall special progress. The Minister of Energy has been allocated 56.4 billion in 2025-2026 financial year. This, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, represents a 37% increase from the 2024-25 budget allocation, a positive step in the right direction. However, while this increase is certainly welcome, it is important to acknowledge that it remains insufficient to address the numerous and pressing challenges facing the energy sector and to meet our growing energy demands. The ministry has clearly articulated its needs, stating that it requires additional funding totaling to 410 billion for several proposed projects that are crucial for the nation's energy security and development. Though the vote has received an increase by 30%, some core-planned activities have been affected. Specifically within the crucial area of electricity generation and supply, the ministry requires an additional 290 billion kwacha. This funding is essential for investments in new generation capacity, for the maintenance and upgrading of existing infrastructure, and the expansion of access to electricity across the country. Honorable members, on MAREP Phase 9 and Phase 10. MAREP Phase 9 and Phase 10 needs an extra 120 billion, which will facilitate completion of Phase 9, which is at 75%, and commence Phase 10 of the project, further extending electricity access to underserved communities and driving rural development. This amount is a must. MAREP is at the heart of each and every member of parliament. Additionally, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the ministry requested an additional 8 billion for land acquisition for the access road and PIU in the Mpatamanga Hydro
Honorable
power
Chairperson,
plant.
consider winding up. You've exhausted 33 minutes. Out of the 20, try to...
Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. First Deputy Speaker. This is the cluster number 1, and I'm here to talk about Chitantamapiri. It's on the last page. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, additionally, Madam Speaker, the ministry requested an additional 8 billion for land acquisition for the access road and PIU in the Patamanga hydropower plant project. The ministry will implement phase 2 of the rehabilitation of Kapichira Dam, which will better build back the dam and bolster its resilience against future storms, thereby safeguarding our energy security. The comprehensive completion of the entire project is expected by May 2027. The House may be pleased to note that the ministry reported that ESCOM has managed to purchase the 90,000 electricity meters under the Malawi Electricity Access Project MEA and will commence grid connections. The project is expected to conclude by June 2025. The construction of the 301 megawatts and 60 megawatts power plants is planned for the second quarter of 2026, with commercial operations targeted for 2030. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, NOCMA. For NOCMA, it had planned a strategic approach for purchase of fuel using the government-to-government approach, and currently discussions are ongoing with the United Arab Emirates. Additionally, NOCMA informed the cluster that the Reserve Bank of Malawi disbursed 10 million Malawi kwacha weekly for $10 million weekly for purchase of fuel, and Tanga has 51 million liters of fuel, and therefore the country is safe, as other contractors will be providing consignments as per contractual basis. Nevertheless, NOCMA is currently exploring the usage of Mtwara Port in Tanzania as another option. A route assessment is being planned to check feasibility of this route. With regards to MERA, I wish to inform Mr. Second Deputy Speaker that MERA has committed to paying off all the levies to MAREP and Roads Fund Administration only when the fuel prices have been stabilized. But currently, the levies are used to pay for fuel purchases. In general, to ensure that we maximize the impact of this essential investment, the ministry therefore requires an additional funding totaling to 410 billion Malawi kwacha for its main project. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, as I'm going towards concluding, let me appraise this House with the cluster's brief analysis from the National Water Resources Authority and the National Herbarium Botanic Gardens. These institutions, though distinct in their mandates, share common challenges that hinder their ability to fully contribute to our national development goals. These challenges include underfunding, staffing, constraint rates, and the need for adequate resources to carry out their core functions. National Water Resources Authority. Let me begin with the National Water Resources Authority was allocated 500 million in 2025-26 financial year, which represents a near 100% increase from the 2024-25 revised provision. While this increase is commendable, it's crucial to develop deeper the specifics. The cluster has observed that the persistent underfunding of personnel directly impacts the authority capacity to attract and retain the skilled workforce necessary for its operations. Furthermore, the NWRA has not been allocated any funds under the Kamuzu Barrage Management Unit or RT, despite entering into a memorandum of understanding with Ejenko to assume management of the Kamuzu Barrage. The authority requires 900 million kwacha for this crucial responsibility, and the absence of allocated funds casts a shadow over their ability to effectively manage this vital infrastructure. Lastly, National Herbarium and Botanical Gardens. Now, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, let's turn our attention to the National Herbarium and Botanical Gardens, where in the 2025-26 financial year, they have been allocated 2.87 billion, a 91% increase from the mid-year revised budget. It's important to note that the provision for the 2024-25 financial year was more than double the provision for the preceding year of 2023-24, increasing from 859.5 million to 1.75 billion. The trajectory indicates a growing recognition of the importance of this institution. To effectively carry out its mandate, the National Herbarium requested additional resources amounting to 1.1 billion for recruitment, functional review, finalization of other works. Conclusion. In conclusion, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, I urge you to consider, I urge the Minister of Finance to consider the recommendations presented today by prioritizing agriculture and food security, investing in energy and infrastructure, supporting natural resources and mining, and addressing cross-cutting issues. Among others, we can build a stronger, more resilient, a more prosperous Malawi together. Let us work together with a shared vision, a commitment to excellence, to ensure that this budget serves as a catalyst for positive change, sustainable development. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, we are happy as a cluster that we were the last one because we have emphasized on everything. And we do hope that whatever has been presented from this report will be taken on board by the Minister of Finance. Agriculture and energy are very key. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, I therefore, on behalf of the cluster number 1, Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation Committee, Natural Resources and Climate Change Committees, submit this report for close attention by the Minister. I submit, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Vice Chairperson of the very important cluster, Agriculture, Natural Resources, and other subcommittees that are there. Indeed, you presented a long but very important report. For purposes of information, you are the son of the then First Deputy Speaker. Much respect, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Nice job. Honourable members, we've exhausted, I think, all the committee reports, and now we recognize the government chief whip, the people of Mzimba Sorora. Minister of Transport, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Good afternoon. I rise to pray that we revert back to general business on the order paper. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, there's a motion that we go back to the previous business, which is general business, item 2B rather. Those of the opinion say aye, and those of the government say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried.
General business. Item 2B, presentation of delegation reports. The Honourable Member for Sanje Central to present a delegation report on the essentials of migration management training of selected members of the Committee on Defence and Security held in South Africa from 30th May to 1st June 2023.
Honourable Member from Sanje Central, do you wish to speak to your report?
Yes.
No. You first state what is given on your folder.
First Deputy Speaker, I beg to present the papers standing on my name under item 2B, Roman numeral 2 of the order paper.
B Roman numeral 1. Should be 1.
2B, Roman numeral 1 of the order paper.
Thank you. Thank you. Sergeant at Arms. Honourable Member from Sanje Central, do you wish to speak to your report?
Yes, First Deputy Speaker.
Please proceed forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. First Deputy Speaker. Last time I stood on this podium to make a presentation of the same report, there were some chows at the opposite side of government. So it is my prayer today that evil mind shouldn't be there again today. Thank you. First Deputy Speaker, I thank you for recognizing me to present this delegation report to this Honorable House on behalf of the Honorable Members of Defense and Security Committee who attended the Essentials of Migration Management training in South Africa from 30th May to 1st June 2022. First Deputy Speaker, at the outset, I wish to thank your office for honoring us with the opportunity to attend this training and Parliament Secretariat for providing the necessary technical services and facilitating the trip. Let me also take this opportunity to extend the delegates' appreciation to the International Organization for Migration for sponsoring the delegation. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the International Organization for Migration is the leading intergovernmental organization in the field of migration and works closely with government, intergovernmental, and non-governmental partners. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, IOM works with 174 member states, a further 8 states holding observer status and offices in over 100 countries. IOM is dedicated to promoting human and orderly migration for the benefit of all. It does so by providing services and advice to the governments and migrants, and it is part of the United Nations system as related organization. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, IOM works to help ensure the orderly and human management of migration, to promote international cooperation on migration issues, to assist in the search for practical solutions to migration problems, and provide humanitarian assistance to migrants in need, including refugees and internally displaced people. To this end, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, allow me to give highlights of the training. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, the delegation attended a training session on the global context of migration. In this session, participants were taken through a conceptual framework of migration where micro and micro-level factors were noted to be the drivers of migration. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, it was learned that depending on the combination of the drivers, people may move temporarily or permanently, or may stay close or move far, and may as well move regularly or irregularly. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, your delegates were also taken through the International Migration Law and Human Rights session. The participants were informed that the International Migration Law is an umbrella term for the set of principles and norms related to migration, covering the following: A, right of migrants; B, competences and obligation of states toward migrants; and C, states' collaboration and coordination among each other in the field of migration. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, just as citizens of a country have responsibilities towards their country, so do migrants. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, participants were informed that migrants have responsibilities to comply with national law, just as all citizens must comply. However, these are specified as the national level, for example, in the country of residence. The national legislation and international levels need to be aligned or non-contradictory in order to make life of migrants bearable. Your delegates, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, also learned that migration plays a part in development, as it is a strategy to diversify income and reduce risk for both migrants and their families, while improving access to health and education. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, migration can also be a driver of development, as dynamics such as diaspora engagement, entrepreneurship, and remittances can contribute to the development prospects of migrants' origin countries. Migrants can also contribute to the development of the territories they live in, both at national and local levels. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, despite migration being a driver of development, the participants also learned that the link between migration and sustainable development is not automatic. As such, if not carefully managed, migration may have unintended consequences on sustainable development, such as brain drain, deterioration of the environment, and increased inequalities if specific groups of people do not benefit from the development in ways that other groups do. As such, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, there is a need to regulate migration. To this end, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, your delegates were taken through a topic on regulating migration and border management, where it was learned that there were 3 types of border, namely A, land borders. These are politically defined boundaries separating physical territory between political entities and the areas where political entities exercise border governance measures on their territory extraterritorially. B, maritime borders. These are governed by treaties and customary international law, most prominently the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. States have sovereign rights over their international waters. For archipelagic states, also the archipelagic waters, and the territorial sea as established by the international law more generally. C, air borders. These correspond to the land and or maritime borders of a state in a direct vertical line. Every state has complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above its territory, including its territorial sea. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, it was also learned that agencies responsible for the border management usually deploy officials at or in the vicinity of the borders at point of entry. It was further learned that apart from formal border control points, informal border crossing are also frequent in many countries, just as is the case with our borders, where people frequently cross and recross borders in both directions, either to go to a hospital on one side or to markets on the other, as well as to access education, hence the need to have proper border management mechanisms. Mr. First Deputy Speaker, your delegates were taken through a topic on trafficking in persons. On trafficking in persons, Mr. First Deputy Speaker, it was noted that the international community arrived at a definition of the crime of trafficking in 2000 with the entry into force of protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, trafficking protocol.
Osaiwala kupanga subscribe ku channel ya AMTV Malawi.